Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to day 17. I am going to be kind of popping in and out to give you some instructions as you watch Mrs. Foley's video. So enjoy.
Well, hello, fifth graders. Welcome back to Wit and Wisdom in Sync. I'm Miss Foley, and this is Module 1, Cultures in Conflict. I can hardly wait to get started. You will need some materials for today's lesson. You'll need your copy of Thunder Rolling in the Mountains, your Wit and Wisdom in Sync journal, a pen or pencil.
Okay, so we will need colored pencils. So keep those in nearby, but you'll also need handout 22A today. That is the story map, and you will also need your workbook close by.
And if you happen to have them, colored pencils, crayons, or watercolors, by the way, we'll only be using yellow, blue, green, and red, and those are optional, so if you don't have them or don't care to use them, that's absolutely fine.
But by optional, she means I definitely want you to use them. So please do. It'll help you, I promise. Just like when we used green, yellow, and blue to color code our informative explanatory paragraph, she's going to do the same thing. So if you like to paint or you just like to use crayons or colored pencils, whatever you want to do, as long as you have the colors that she stated, then that's fine with me.
If you need any of those materials, pause the video now to retrieve them. It's nice to see you. In today's lesson, we are going to spend some time talking about what happened in the fabulous chapters 10, 11, and 12. And if you haven't had a chance to read those chapters yet, I urge you to pause the video and do that now.
Now, we did that in Tuesday's lesson. So if you haven't read them, like if you weren't with us during that lesson, then you might want to stop right now and make sure that you are caught up. But if you were attending classes and reading with us, then you are all set for today.
Join me again when you're ready. What does a deeper exploration of mood reveal in the novel? Raise your hand if you've heard this word, mood. What does it mean when we talk about mood in a story? Mood. Mood is a noun. Read the definition aloud with me. The overall feeling or atmosphere of a passage or piece of literature.
You're going to want to make sure you pause this video and go ahead and add this to your InSync journal.
Feeling. That's interesting. Have you ever wondered or thought about why you might prefer reading some books more than others? Well, there are lots and lots of reasons for that, of course. And one reason is because of the way that authors are able to communicate mood through their words. Authors choose their words and details very carefully to create a very specific mood or feeling for any particular scene. They might want to create a peaceful scene, a joyful scene, or maybe even a serious or sad one. And we want to know how they do that. Good readers pay attention to descriptions of characters, setting, and events for clues about the mood. So, that's what we're going to do. How might an author create a peaceful mood through the setting? Where might such a scene take place? What time of day would it be? How might the author describe the weather or the surroundings? How might the author create a peaceful mood through the characters? What might they be doing? What might they be thinking or feeling? How might an author create a peaceful mood through the events taking place. What would be happening? What kinds of events would be going on? So for me, and this might be a little bit different for you depending on how you like to feel peaceful, a peaceful scene might take place on a beach or in the countryside, somewhere out in nature, maybe even a forest, without a lot of noise and very little action. The weather might be sunny or even a little bit cloudy, maybe with a rainbow. The characters would be calm and happy and really at ease. They might be doing something fun like observing a sunset or taking a walk or just thinking quietly to themselves. And I also think the scene would probably not be full of action, and there definitely wouldn't be any conflict between the characters. In this lesson, we're going to explore the scenes from chapter 11 and 12 together to see how the author uses language to create a mood that reflects the events. But before we do that, it's important that we have a solid understanding of what's happening in these chapters. So before we continue together, you're going to summarize the events in chapters 11 and 12 with your classroom teacher and share any questions that you had as you read. Pause the video now to complete that work with your classroom teacher, and I'll see you back here when you're ready.
Okay, boys and girls, I want you to head on over to Schoology, and I want you to complete handout 22A. It's the story map. So give it your very best shot, and when you are done, you should be able to go back and see the correct answers and see how you did. So when you're finished, you can come on back here and we will continue on.
Hello! Nice to see you back. Now that you've had an opportunity to summarize the events in chapters 11 and 12 with your classroom teacher, we'll take a closer look at a scene from chapter 11 together. We're going to look at how Scott Odell has created a certain mood through the careful selection of his words. You're going to need your copy of Thunder Rolling in the Mountains, so retrieve that now if you need to. Are you ready to take a look? Let's take a look at a scene from chapter 11. Please open your books to page 59 on the second page of this chapter. Isn't it incredible how much the Nimiku have been through in chapters 10 and 11? Remember that chapter 11 opens in the middle of the night following a fierce battle with the soldiers in a valley called Big Hole. Oh, you can also find that on the map right here. Read along with me as I read this scene, and we're going to begin right here before we started off. Before we started off, we buried many of our dead. As we wrapped them in soft buffalo robes, we wailed songs of mourning. The sounds pierced the air as our loss pierced our hearts. With each one, we buried some of that person's prized possessions: a flute, a necklace, bracelets of copper wire, an embroidered headband. When I helped bury my beautiful mother, my tears fell hot on her wrappings. With knives, we dug shallow graves in the little ravines along the river bank. There, we placed our dead and pulled earth over them. Chief Joseph led the women, children, old men, and the rest of our warriors away from Big Hole. Whitebird, who was too old to fight, rode with us. The other chiefs stayed to fight. We left many buffalo robes and much food. Our things were scattered on the ground. We traveled toward the low, rolling hills, then swung south toward the mountains. As we moved away, the sounds of battle grew faint. In the gray dawn, a broad path stretched behind us, where our ponies' feet trampled the grass. The travois poles made furrows in the ground. Our warriors would find it easy to follow. The morning mists cleared, and the summer sun beat down upon us. Clouds of dust rose around the travois. We stopped often to shade the eyes of our wounded and to wet their parched lips. After a long half-sun, we halted at a little stream shaded by willows. The sun was still in the sky, but our wounded could travel no farther. That night, Fairland died. My father held her hand as she died, and he grieved with me. We grieved for my mother, too. As the spirit of Olcott's wife entered the afterworld, we saw my mother die again. My father sighed deeply. We never make war on women and children, he said, but the bluecoats kill our women and children first. That is a shameful way to fight. What is happening in this scene? Share a brief summary or recap these events in your own words, either with a learning partner or just on your own. Remember to include the characters, the setting, and the events in your summary. So you might have thought about sound of running feet and her people burying those who died in the Battle of Big Hole. Then Chief Joseph leads the women, children, and old men away from the valley toward the mountains as some of the warriors stay to fight. And after a long day of travel, the tribe stops to rest, and Olcott's wife, Fairland, dies. If we were to come up with a title for this scene, what do you think a good title would be? I'm thinking about how much tragedy has occurred, and this is all that they're enduring after the Battle of Big Hole. I wonder if we could call this the tragic aftermath of the Battle of Big Hole. Aftermath means anything that happens after a big and serious event. That would be a title that we could come up with. How would you describe the characters' feelings in this scene? Over here, I notice that the characters in this scene are burying their dead. And on page 60, it says, "My father held her hand as she died, and he grieved with me." I know that grieved means that they were feeling enormous sadness. And I also know that they were traveling in the hot sun with all of their wounded. I guess I would describe the characters' feelings as being very sad. And another word for that is despondent. And I also think they were probably exhausted or very weary. What feeling does this scene create for you as a reader? In other words, what's the mood? I'm thinking about this scene right here, this small part of the scene. My father held her hand as she died, and he grieved with me. We grieved for my mother, too. As the spirit of Olcott's wife entered the afterworld, we saw my mother die again. It's as if they're having to experience this enormous amount of death. That quote to me is something that I would capture as one of the really key determiners of the mood for me. I'm also thinking about this scene down here, this portion. Bending Willow, remember Bending Willow as the baby sister? Bending Willow cried for my mother and for my mother's milk. I fed her soft mush, but she spat it out and cried harder. Then Dear Woman knelt by my side. Her baby had been killed by the bluecoats. This, too, was an indicator, as a quotation, of the mood that Scott Odell really set in this particular scene. So the words that I might choose to describe this mood are, again, very sad, and I actually think a better word is despondent. And in a sense, the mood to me feels a little bit hopeless. Now you'll examine the mood in another scene. This scene is from the end of chapter 12. Turn in your books to page 67 of chapter 12 and find the passage that begins not long after we had reached Camas Meadows. Have you found it? Do you remember what the events were leading up to this scene? The Nez Perce had just returned from a raid on the soldiers' camp, and they had stolen some of their horses and mules to make it harder for the soldiers to follow them. For this check for understanding, you'll discover the mood of this scene. Reread the passage on pages 67 and 68 from the words "not long after" till the end of page 68. Write a title for the passage and a 2 to 3 sentence summary. Then answer these questions. How do the characters feel in the scene? Write 1 or 2 words to describe how the characters feel and explain your choices. What feeling does this scene create for you as a reader? Write 1 or 2 words to describe the mood. And finally, what details does the author use to create this mood? Record 2 quotations from the text. Pause the video and reread the passage. Then complete the task in your journals. After you complete the check for understanding, you'll have an opportunity to reflect on your work and your learning with your classroom teacher.
Okay, boys and girls, so what I want you to do at this point is I want you to head on over to your InSync journal, and the opportunity to respond to this check for understanding is in there. So all of these directions can be found in your InSync journal.
Welcome back. You've been looking at the way that an author uses words to create a certain mood. Sometimes I think that a mood can be dark and gloomy, or bright and hopeful, kind of like colors. Speaking of colors, drum roll please. Guess what we're going to examine next? A painted essay. Yes, with colors. You've learned a lot about writing strong, informative paragraphs, and you've been practicing writing both explanatory and comparison-contrast paragraphs. And all that work that you've been doing on those shorter pieces, paragraphs, has been great preparation for Focusing Question Task 5. You'll write a longer essay to express your ideas about the beliefs and values that guide Chief Joseph and Sound of Running Feet. So today you'll learn about something called the painted essay, which will help you learn and remember the parts of an essay and how they work together to form a whole, complete essay. In a few moments, we'll be working with handout 22B, the painted essay template, and it looks like this. A template is a document that shows the basic format of something or how it's supposed to be put together. And in this case, it's how the painted essay is supposed to be put together. For this next part of the lesson, you can use colored pencils, crayons, or even watercolor paints. And if you don't have them, though, that's okay. It's not necessary. We are only going to use red, green, yellow, and blue. So pause the video now to retrieve handout 22B and the colors if you have them and you'd like to use them. So you'll need handout 22B, the painted essay template for this. And as you look it over, just consider how many paragraphs do you see? That's right, there are 4. There's this paragraph, this paragraph, this paragraph, and this paragraph. And as we work through this painted essay, I want you to remember that the work that we did coloring the parts of the paragraph is sort of similar, and I want you to think about this painted essay as like an expansion of the paragraphs that we've done. So each of the paragraphs has a name and a special job or a function, just like the parts of a paragraph. And each one has its own color to help you remember its name and job in the essay. If you don't have colors, you can follow along and use color words to label the paragraphs. That'll be perfectly fine. So we'll start up here with introduction and thesis. The introduction should give context or background knowledge so that your reader is going to understand the piece that you're providing. The introduction needs to catch the audience's attention so that they'll want to read more. You know what? Red is a catchy color. So we're going to color the introduction red, stopping at this line right over the word thesis. Color your copies in the same way. You can do yours more neatly, and I'll get to mine shortly. Notice that there is a thesis at the end of the introduction paragraph. The thesis is the most important sentence of the essay because it tells the essential idea about the topic, just as the topic statement tells the essential idea about a topic in a paragraph. So in this way, the thesis in an essay and the topic statement in a paragraph steer these pieces of writing in a way that the steering wheel steers a car. So we're only going to paint this portion green. Remember how we did our topic statement green? We are going to do the same with our thesis because, again, it's the most important sentence of the essay because it tells the essential idea. And in this essay, the thesis has got two supporting points. There's point 1 and point 2. So I want you to go ahead, this should seem familiar as well, and color point 1 yellow, and point 2 is going to be blue. Does that seem familiar? Remember when we used these same colors for each point we made in a paragraph? All right, the next paragraph is called a supporting paragraph. Since you have 2 points in the thesis, these are the 2 supporting paragraphs, 1 and 2. The number can change based on how many points a writer has. So if you had 3 points here, you could have 3 supporting paragraphs, 1 point here, 1 supporting paragraph, and so forth. The job of this first supporting paragraph is to give evidence for the first point of the thesis and explain how that evidence relates to the point. So, what color is point 1 of your thesis? Yep, it's yellow. So guess what color we're going to color the first supporting paragraph? You guessed it. It'll be yellow. You can follow along and color on your own template. We're going to skip this little line right here, sort of an imaginary line going across under the word transition. What do you think the job of the second supporting paragraph is right here? That's right. The second supporting paragraph gives evidence for the second point of the thesis and explains how the evidence relates to this point. So, guess what color it is? Blue. That's right, but watch carefully what I do. I'm going to save a tiny spot here under the word transition and just color the paragraph part. And don't worry, I will come back to transition and show you what we are going to do with that. So now I have a blue supporting paragraph that matches my second point. I just noticed this should be point 2, shouldn't it? Glad I caught that. All right. So let's come back to this transition right here. Remember that a transition is a sentence that moves readers from one big point in a piece to the next big point, kind of like a bridge between the 2 points. So we're going to color the transition between point 1 and point 2 a combination, yellow and blue. Why do you think that is? Give yourself a thumbs up if you said that the 2 colors represent both point 1 and point 2. And the colors help us understand that the transition connects those 2 points. So you can do this any way you want. I'm going to do, for fun, I'm going to do stripes. Some blue and some yellow because it's going to be the connection between these two supporting paragraphs. There we go, I've got both. You can do polka dots, you can do anything you like right here, but take the time to put both yellow and blue, but don't mix them together. And fill in your transition area. All right, here's the last paragraph, conclusion. This paragraph is called the conclusion just like the concluding statement of a paragraph, and its job is to wrap up the piece. So an essay conclusion actually has two parts. It has a what and a so what. The conclusion has to reinforce the thesis up here or the essential idea. That's your what. But you also need to add a little bit of your own thinking and tell your audience why what you said is important. And we're going to call that the so what. When we're writing a conclusion, you use the ideas in your first supporting paragraph in the yellow and your second supporting paragraph in blue to figure out something new. So what happens when you mix yellow and blue? Green. So I'm going to color the paragraph yellow and blue, but mixed to create green. Watch how this goes. This new green color shows that after you've considered all the facts, you kind of arrive back at the thesis. Did you notice that the color that you mixed is green, but it's a different shade of green than your original thesis? Yep, and I'll have to fix that up a little bit. The conclusion is green because when you run the ideas in the yellow and blue paragraphs through your own minds, they come together and they make something new, your own thinking on the topic. This check for understanding will help you reflect on your understanding of what a painted essay is, so that it'll be easier to get started when you begin writing. In your journal, list the parts of an essay and explain the job of each part. Pause the video and complete this check for understanding in your journal, and meet me back here when you've completed it. It's nice to have some color in a lesson, isn't it? That's why I like the painted essay so much. It's a colorful way to remember not only the parts of an essay, but how those parts are connected. So now I'm always going to remember that yellow and blue make green. So the painted essay is also a format that'll help you stay organized and you can communicate your ideas more clearly. That reminds me. We've also learned about mood and how the author uses careful word choice to communicate the mood of a scene.
Okay, boys and girls, that's actually all we have for today. We are going to finish up with the questions tomorrow and some other parts of our activity. So great job today. Make sure if you used paint for your painted essay that you let it dry. See ya!